Hello, everybody. Hi, it's Frank Foley again with another one of my conversations with brilliant people who just feel sorry for me, and they completely acknowledge my midlife crisis, and they have taken pity on me and they've chosen to speak to me for half an hour, really kind of not knowing what I'm going to say, but then they're in the same boat as me because I don't know what I'm going to say either. So this project, The Stories of Our Lives, is just a chance to I don't know, do my little tiny little bit to try and connect people by showing that, despite all the noise of what we believe, underneath we're just people who have stories that we're trying to tell, and some that we maybe don't want to tell, whatever it might be. So I've got a fantastic lady who I'm calling her a lady because I don't really know her. This person that I don't know very well, another person that I don't know very well, Sarah Lieberman. Is that right, Sarah?
Well, my maiden name is Lieberman and my married name is McLaughlin, and you put them together and you get McLieberlin.
Fantastic. Wow. It starts right there, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I normally go by Dr. Lieberman at work and Mrs. McLaughlin at home. So kind of like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but, less murder.
This is just so brilliant right off the bat, because already I'm thinking, women have to deal with the whole patriarchal kind of giving up of their, like the idea of a maiden name. It's so archaic. But I don't know if you're aware of this fantastic book that Doris Lessing wrote in I want to say it's the late 50s. I can't really remember. Mm-hmm. It's called The Golden Notebook.
Okay.
And Doris Lessing was like fascinated with 19th century literature, and she loved Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and all of those people. But she couldn't write a 19th century novel. She wanted to write something that reflected her time. So she wrote this fantastic book, The Golden Notebook, and it's like this character, Anna Wolf. She is the modern woman, and she writes these different notebooks which are different parts of herself. So there's a black notebook, which is her black notebook is her private self. Her yellow notebook is her mother. As a mother. Yeah. Her red notebook is her political self. And she splits herself into all these different people.
Oh, that's weird. That's like my social media accounts. That's like, I have Twitter for work. I have Instagram, which is me and my life. I have Facebook, which is, what my family sees, what my mum's on, So that's Facebook's me as a mother, Twitter is me as a professional, Instagram is, my deepest, darkest self, I think, in some ways. Yeah.
That's so brilliant.
Yeah.
You know what's really funny though, but on top of that, you also have these different names that you go by as well. So you've got Dr. Lieberman, and then you've got, I'm not sure about true selves, but that your proper name is Sarah Lieberman. But Lieberman. Yeah, and it's just like all of these different. Do you have this thing? See, when I go home, I'm Frank Foley now, because when I was about 19, I decided that I had to be a serious person. But I was called Frankie when I was young.
Oh, okay.
And if I go to my parents still call me Frankie, which is really weird because I kind of regress back to being about 15 again.
Yeah.
So for you've got all these different names that you have to fit in. It's like, who am I talking to at the moment? It's like,
who am I? Occasionally I find myself, signing the kids into school or signing something at one of their clubs, Sarah Lieberman. And they're like, well, wait a minute, which child is yours? I thought you were Mick McLaughlin's mother. And I'm like, yes, I am. But I happen to have a different name. Sometimes women don't have the same name. I wasn't going to change my name at all, to be honest. But when I was on maternity leave with Maisie, the Inland Revenue sent me a cheque for, it was a substantial amount of money. It was about £800 because of paying tax during maternity leave. And the cheque, they made a cheque out to Sarah McLaughlin. And as I got in touch with them, I was like, but I'm Sarah Lieberman, and I only have a bank account as Sarah Lieberman, and I've only ever paid tax and national insurance as Sarah Lieberman. My national insurance number is Sarah Lieberman. And they said, did you or did you not marry Roderick McLaughlin and gave me my wedding date? And I was like, yes. And they're like, well, either you set up a new bank account or you don't get the money.
Oh my God.
I set up a bank. So then I had to change the name on a bank account to cash the check. And then the DVLA, when I came to renew my driver's license, they were also like, they automatically sent it back as Sarah McLaughlin. And that's a weird one, because my driving license, because it was Dr. Sarah Lieberman, came back as Dr. Sarah McLaughlin, which to me sounds like a village GP. And I'm just like, no, that's not right. I'm not Dr. Sarah McLaughlin. I'm Dr. Sarah Lieberman, or Mrs. Sarah McLaughlin. The whole thing, yeah, very separated out. But so that's the patriarchal society that we live in. You
That's
think
brilliant.
maybe moved on, but the Inland Revenue haven't moved on. Inland
No,
Revenue,
they're firmly.
you must therefore have his name. And it was like, okay, then, at that point it was worth £800 to change a bank account. So, there we go.
That's correct. That's hilarious.
There's a start on why I have so many names.
Yeah. You know what, Sarah, it's really funny, because I think, one of the things this project has brought up for me is the nature of the relationships you have with people. So it's gone from, the kind of clear relationships with your family, they're designated in a certain way. But one of the things that's been really interesting is thinking about, acquaintanceships, or if that's even a word, I might have just made that up, but, acquaintances and what that consists of. And it's really fascinating how much of it is completely made up. I've known you, in that really loose term of the word known, for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
but
since the kids went to school, I suppose.
We probably talked for about 5 minutes maximum in the whole time. But what's really funny is now with social media, you can kind of build up an impression of someone. And I've got to say, you're I guess a lot of I'm speaking for myself here. I look at your profile and I think, wow, she ticks both of the boxes that people want to tick. You're really bright and you're really funny. And I think that's, it's like...
Well, it's nice of you to say so, that's...
but that's what we see, and I suppose social media, it's a bit like that, isn't it? But, you're obviously, for people that don't know, I'm going to make it up now because I don't actually know myself, but, you work at university, you're a professor, am I right?
I would love to be. I'm a senior lecturer in politics.
Okay.
Maybe a professor one day, not quite yet.
Yeah, but right up there, top of your field, and yet you have this brilliant sense of fun, which really comes across when you on social media and everything. And the fact that I'm speaking to you today is all about... I hope you don't mind me telling this, but I saw Sarah about a week and a half ago, and she's, it obviously wasn't her bike, but it was just so brilliant because she rode past me on this tiny bike, which was probably one of her children's. Yeah. And it was just a moment of just delight because she was having so much fun. And, then this big guy walks past and she kind of like, you know what? Oh, fuck you. I don't really care. I'm just going to enjoy it anyway, kind of thing. And she's just riding this tiny little bike along. And it's like, you know what? I want to be like that. You know what I mean? So many people kind of like, they want to ride the tiny bike, but they won't ride the tiny bike.
Yeah, I was trying to carry the tiny bike and I thought, why am I carrying a bicycle? You shouldn't have to carry a bicycle. It's wrong, isn't it? If you've got a bike, you should be riding the bike. And even if the bike doesn't fit. So it was actually quite difficult to get moving on the bike because, you were like, I thought I'd avoided seeing anybody, but... it was like my knees were coming up to basically my ears. But hey, who doesn't want to ride a bike?
Absolutely. In our hearts, we all want to ride that bike.
You could make life difficult for yourself just so that you please other people. You could carry the little bike so that nobody sees you looking like a bit of a fool, or you can ride the bike and just get there. Unfortunately, Maisie, who's 7 now, she's started getting quite embarrassed by the things I do. I thought I had a bit longer before she got embarrassed by me. But if she'd seen me on the bike, she'd have been horrified. She's suddenly embarrassed when I talk to dogs in the street. And I love sausage dogs. I've always loved sausage dogs. And so apparently, whenever I see a sausage dog, I go, oh, it's a sausage dog. And she's absolutely horrified. She's like, Mummy, that's not cool. You're not cool when you do that, when you see sausage dogs. And it's kind of upset me slightly. So she'd have been utterly, utterly disgusted if she'd seen me on the tiny bike. Because that's not what other mothers do.
That's right. I feel the pain. The pain.
Apparently the cool mums don't wave at sausage dogs. They don't ride small bikes. The cool mums hang around looking cool. I'm not cool, apparently.
That's right, and we all have to go through that, don't we?
Yeah.
Now, listen, I've got a few things that I want to get to. Now, I've just made up some really cool thing. I think this is really cool. It might be a total disaster, but I'm gonna start asking people this and see what happens at the end of the kind of 40 minutes or whatever we end up doing. I should have asked you this about 5 minutes ago, but so I want you to think of a song from your past in any way, and a story about whether it's a pop song or anything, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And I want you to tell me a little story about a song, something that, you know, is quirky or whatever it might be at the end, right? And no pressure, you're the first one to do this. So anyway, So don't worry about it now.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is just like, I love the way you were kind of looking away then, and you were already processing that, and that's just so delightful. It's fantastic. Now, here we go. So before we get on to a little bit of like identity stuff in terms of, I want to ask you about your accent, because I think you're Scottish.
Yes, I'm Scottish.
But, okay, so I'm going to ask you about that in a minute. First of all, just please tell me the story of Sizzle. Because let me just explain for people that don't know. On Sarah's Facebook page, it's her name is Sizzle McLean. So can you would you mind explaining?
My initials, I mean, we've just been through my name. My initials are, or like, certainly before I got married, my initials were SZL. So my full name is Sarah Zilda Lieberman. Zilda, obviously, it's not a very common name. It was my granny's name.
No.
So
wow. Okay.
my initials are SZL. And when I was at school, so when I was about 14 or 15, there was a couple of my friends used to call me Sizzle, just because, you know, you had to put your initials on things. And there was so many SLs. In fact, there was so many Sarahs in my school. I think it was about 12 in my year at school. It's just 1979 was the year of the Sarah. And so Sizzle was just like, you know, I would put my initials on things. And when you're putting SL, I would just put the Z in. So a few of my friends called me Sizzle then. And then I'd kind of forgotten about it completely. And then a few years ago, I made a slight faux pas on Facebook. And I said something about work on Facebook and room bookings. At the time, I was the program director at work. And I made a comment about room bookings being unable to book rooms. And I suggested that perhaps, you know, I would go and see them and tell them what I thought. But the chances were they didn't have the same room 2 days in a row, since I wasn't able to book the same room 2 days in a row for my classes. And somebody saw it on Facebook and reported it to my head of department. And at that point, I was still, I was Sarah McLaughlin, actually, I think, on Facebook at that point. But it had been spotted by someone at work. And at that point, I decided that I needed to go completely, like, at least work incognito on Facebook. So I reinstated Sizzle and became Sizzle McLieberlin. And I thought that would be slightly more difficult to find, although in today's modern world, nothing's ever difficult to find. And then I thought, actually, Sizzle McLieberlin is the sort of mix-up of Sarah Lieberman, Sarah McLaughlin, the old Sizzle that I used to be, like back when I was a teenager. And I suppose she is a bit of everything. She's a bit of all my different personalities rolled into one.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow, I love that.
And then also, like, some people just know me as Sizzle because, you know, I joined a running club and I joined a running club in Herne Bay. And yeah, I'd introduced myself as Sarah to people, but then everybody just, you know, you keep in touch on Facebook, and suddenly everybody was calling me Sizzle. I was like, that's odd, but it's cool. I don't mind being Sizzle. Sizzle's, I don't know, part of me. It's really
funny because I didn't know the story, and I didn't know, you know, I knew your name was Sarah because I think we were introduced as Sarah. But obviously being Sizzle on, and I was like, okay, so when I was going to write you a message, I was like, so what do I say? Do I say Sarah?
Is it Sizzle?
It was one of those things where it's like, because I don't know the story, it might be one of those things where only people that know the story can use it.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah, it's not even really a nickname, so to speak, like that.
No.
Yeah. But then quite a few people started calling me Sizzle, so I've like developed a nickname in my late 30s, which is quite interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so listen, one of the things that I love and I've always loved is how we get from where we originally came from to where we are now. I find it fascinating. And so and I'm always fascinated by names and accents, and I'm just interested in what, you know, like, wow, how did you get from here to there? And people, you
Yeah.
find that people have got ancestry that just, you know, you just, oh, wow, tell me the story of that, you know. So, you know, you're down in Whitstable. We don't need the whole, you know, 20 years or whatever it is, but, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, how does a person from Scotland end up in Whitstable? What's the kind of outline story of that?
The very short story is I got a job. I
Right.
finished my PhD, which I was doing in Newcastle. And
Okay, right.
if you want to be an academic, if you want a job in a university, you really have to go where they're looking for somebody with your expertise. So I applied for a few different jobs, and the one I got was at Christchurch, and that was 10 and a half years ago now or something.
Right.
So we thought we'd come down and see what it was like. So I was moving from Newcastle. My husband at the time was like working north of Aberdeen. So he moved the whole length of the country basically.
Wow.
So we came down so that I could take the job at Christchurch, and it was only going to be for a couple of years, but then the bottom fell out the job market and there was nowhere to go.
Wow.
Plus it turned out it was quite a nice place, and there's an awful lot of worse places you could be. And then we had children, and then they got settled, and then we're like on our third house since we moved down, 2 children. You know,
so let's take it back a little bit. Was it a big decision? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Edinburgh.
So was it a big decision to go out of Scotland to go to uni? Was that a thing, or was it?
No, not at all. I wanted to be not so far from Edinburgh, and Newcastle's only an hour and a half on the train. And I was quite familiar with Newcastle. My mum grew up in the borders of Scotland.
Got it.
And so like her nearest big city was Newcastle. So we'd always gone to Newcastle. My dad's from London, so I was quite used to the south of England.
Okay.
My dad used to come on holiday to Whitstable when he was little. Like Whitstable, Westgate and Broadstairs. That was like where he
did have a connection with. There was that connection. That's interesting.
So I didn't even know about that until I moved down here. In fact, when I came for the interview, where I thought Canterbury was on the map turned out to actually be Winchester. So when we got to Canterbury, and I was like, wow, that's not where I thought it was at all. So that was quite a surprise. But yeah, I mean, there's worse places I could have ended up. And as I say, my dad's from the south of England. And so I never felt that kind of Scottish attachment to Scotland that I think some people do.
That was going to be my next question. I spoke to someone else, and Amanda, a couple of weeks ago, and she's from Wales, and I've known her for ages. I didn't even know she grew up in the valleys, and she was, I mean, you listen to her now, her accent's quite mild, but she was like, oh, it's properly Welsh, like, you know.
Yeah. Oh,
so
wow,
for you, did you think of yourself as Scottish as opposed to English, or I mean, obviously to a certain extent, but. So and that was going to be my next place. So, how does that work? Because I'm fascinated by this because my dad was American and my mum was English, and I was born in the States. I was born in New York, but I've been raised over here. I've always had this kind of love affair with my, other identity. My official identity is I'm an American citizen, which is really weird.
That's interesting.
And I that made me special as a kid. You know what I mean? That kind of like I had an American passport, and I was like very cool because of that. So for you, just one other thing interesting. I don't know if you can speak to this because this is quite interesting. My dad had lived in this country for a long time, and I always felt my dad was slightly more protective of American things than he would have been if he'd been in the States. I think he would have been much more critical of American society if he'd been there. But I think being like a foreigner in a different country, when he felt the need to defend America, I think sometimes more. Do you feel like your Scottishness is kind of different than it would be if you were just in Scotland? How does that work?
No, it's an interesting one because I left Scotland when I was 18, and I've not really lived in Scotland again since.
Right.
I've never lost my accent, and I think people maybe see me as being more Scottish than I see myself. I like Scotland. I like going back. I wouldn't move back. My life's down here. There's nothing, there's nothing that would stop me going back to Scotland except the fact that all my friends are here, my children are settled here.
Right.
But I don't know, like my dad, as I said, my dad's English, but then he himself was half Russian. And my granddad was Russian. I mean, he died 5-6 years ago. he came over in before the First World War during the Russian pogroms. So he was Jewish Russian, and
Wow.
so we're all a mixture, aren't we? And
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you wouldn't know now that my dad wasn't Scottish. Like, he has a very Scottish accent. He's been in Edinburgh since he was 18. I think a Scottish accent is easier to pick up than it is to lose, to be honest.
Yeah,
I think Scottish people tend to keep their accents. I don't know. Yeah, I would still consider myself Scottish before any other nationality.
Yeah.
Although I'm very strong.
If you went abroad, would you say you were Scottish rather than British?
Oh,
that's a tricky one.
It's a tricky one. I would never say I was English. I might say I was British. I would probably say Scottish. Yeah.
It's interesting.
But I'm very, passionately European as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course, because of
Europe.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I'm really fascinated. Another thing that I'm really fascinated in is I've always been interested in how we thrive, how we create. When I was a kid, I didn't understand, and I used to talk to adults all the time. It seemed to be our world. The world was made up of people, and yet there were lots of people that were unhappy, and I didn't understand why. Mm-hmm. It had to be like that. So I would say, why don't we do things where we're all getting on? You know what? That I've never really stopped asking that question in my very naive way. Yeah. Out of that though, in my adult life has come this kind of, just real interest in how we flourish and how we thrive and how we shine. And I suppose so kind of moving away from maybe some backstory for you, my first question to you is how do you shine? What's thriving to you, Sarah?
People, friends. I need people around. I need music around. If I don't go out a couple of times a week and listen to live music and dance with my friends, then I go dull. I begin to not want to go out anymore. If I don't sing, if I don't do the things that I enjoy, I stop enjoying everything. So for me, thriving is all about remembering what it is that makes you happy and making sure you do it. And I think that's one of the difficulties when you have children is that suddenly the things that you love doing, you can't necessarily do anymore. Right. So for me, watching people create live music, dancing to it, singing along, speaking to friends, has always been a very big part of my life. And suddenly you have children and you can't do that anymore. And it takes a while to remember what it was that made you happy. Yeah. And that my children, of course, make me happy, but I don't think you can base your whole happiness on your children.
I totally agree with that.
If you base your happiness on your children when they tell you that you're uncool for liking sausage dogs, then you would break.
That's exactly right.
Awful. And so you need to have your life. You need to do what makes you happy, and that's what makes me thrive. Sometimes, it means staying out late and speaking to people I don't really know and dancing with other people who are enjoying that lifestyle. Then, that's a whole other side to me as well. That's something that I need to do. And I love running as well. I need to occasionally go out and run as fast as I can, as far as I can in a thumping rainstorm and feel the wind and the rain on my face and wash away all the things that are awful. And I think I'm kind of a person of extremes. I'm either on the sofa wrapped in a blanket and refusing to leave, or dancing till dawn, or running in storms, or screaming at the full moon. And but I think you have to follow your spirit. I think that you can't. I see so many people who try and live through their children, and I think, what you're going to do? It's only 10 years until they leave home and forge their own lives.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I feel like it just creates a pressure if that, you know, if
Yeah.
your happiness depends on, in a way, if your happiness depends on anything kind of like outside your own ability to just find some peace,
Yes.
then it creates a kind of like expectation and the pressure on that thing. And probably the worst thing you could do is like with your children, you know, because you don't know how they're going to turn out. You know, I've always felt like we're kind of custodians of them because they're going to be adults for a lot longer than they're going to be children.
Exactly.
You know. Yeah,
And I hope that, you know, they will grow up to be people with their own interests and their own lives who will enjoy doing the same things as I do. You know, I go running with my dad. My dad's in his 60s now and still does a lot of running. He's a very fast runner, actually. But
Wow.
he installed in me like a love of being outside and a love of running and, you know, feeling the wind and rain, hopefully behind your heels, but sometimes in your face. And he's like very much instilled in me the fact that if anything's wrong, you go and like run your way through it. And my mum's an amazing cook, and I still enjoy cooking with my mum. And you know, we share those interests, and we all enjoy eating and drinking, and just, you know. And I hope that my children grow up to enjoy the same things as I do, and you know, maybe I'll be able to go out for a run with them or go to gigs with them when they're older. But I can't put my whole life on hold and expect them to provide me with happiness, because for the most part, I mean, a whole lot of the time they can be complete and utter dicks, and like they can be awful little people. Like you can't base your happiness on them. Sorry, was that a bit too honest?
No, it's just sorry, it just made me giggle because it's just funny, that's all. Okay, listen, this is a tricky one. This is one that I heard, I'm totally plagiarized. This is a great guy called I would say Mike Gervais, but he pronounces it Mike Gervais, American guy. He now works with the Seattle Seahawks American football team, but his whole field is human resiliency and kind of grit. There's a great book by a lady called, academic called Angela Duckworth, who wrote this book called Grit. How we, you know, it's very much about how we make kind of, if you can call them, good decisions under pressure and that kind of thing, you know. And I was listening to an interview of his the other day, and he asked this fantastic lady called Anne Parmenter, who's just amazing. She's climbed Everest. She's done all these incredible things. She's an incredible human being. And he asked her, he said, what do I need to know about you to really get you? So again, I stole that question from him. So you're the first person I've asked this. So, you know, it was like, I was like, what does that mean? It's like defining facts. Yeah. And it's you know, you can't answer it, but just have a go anyway. So
I think a lot of what you would need to know, if you want to know me, there's a story that might, I think maybe explains me. When I was 20, I lived in Strasbourg in France, and it was in a flat there was like 9 other people. It was a fairly big flat. And one day I was walking past the kitchen door, and there was a girl standing. It was a Turkish girl. She was really nice. I got on really well with her. And she was cooking chips. So you had a chip pan, and the chip pan was on fire. Okay. And she was standing there with a glass of water in her hand. And I sort of went, Fatima, no. And because I'd shouted, she missed the chip pan with the whole glass, but a drop of it went in, and it went up like a bomb, right? Oh, so instead of doing anything useful, I ran for the door, just screaming, not screaming anything useful, like not screaming for help, just like literally going, ah! And we were on the 5th floor. And so all I could think about was, I need to get out before the whole building goes up. So I ran for the door screaming. And then I got down the first flight of stairs, and I thought, I'm going back for my guitar. So I ran back up the stairs, still screaming, got my guitar and ran back out. And there was a Romanian man lived there as well. He was a bit older. I think at the time I thought he was really old, but he'd probably be younger than I am now.
Yeah, he's like 32 or something.
Yeah, 32. He was really old and responsible. And so he grabs hold of me and he's like, what's wrong? I was like, there's a fire! And he's like, I just put it out. And so I was still like running around screaming, holding my guitar. And yeah, so I would say, don't rely on me in a real panic, because apparently I don't react well. I always think I'm like quite good in a high pressure situation, but in actual fact, all I will do is start screaming and grab my guitar, apparently. So I would say,
I love it.
I
love it.
probably sums me up. You know, I might come across as being quite calm and collected, but when put under pressure, I will grab the things that mean most to me and run for the hills. Yeah.
Perfect. Right. I've just thrown this question out to a few people. Sarah, what are we doing here?
On this planet? Or
okay.
Here? Here. Where?
Okay.
What are we doing on the planet? I don't know. I have no idea. I was brought up non-religious, so I can't even, resort to God. I don't know. I think we're here probably to enjoy ourselves, to do what we can to help other people enjoy themselves, to help other people out. I think if you're not helping people, your life is probably quite empty.
Wow, I love that. Yeah.
I assume,
you know what? Yeah, go on, carry on.
I assume we're here to live together and make the most of it. It's a beautiful world. It's a really beautiful place. And there's some beautiful things around. So I think we're here to appreciate it.
I love that. And it's just, part of this for me is that I spent a lot of time, in my head and just, I'm really not doing what I really love to do, which is connect to people and just, as a kid, I was always a harmonizer and I didn't like it when people fought and try and start fights and get a black eye, and it's taken me quite a while to get over my own, my thinking and just actually do what I love to do, which is just talk to people and listen to stories and just maybe, try and connect people like that. That's fantastic. I love that. We're not going to be too much longer. I've just got a couple of other things. So this is kind of like a cliched one, but I just like it because it's quite interesting. So remember Sizzle?
Yeah.
That girl that you were talking about?
Yeah.
So I've got a little time machine and I'm going to lend it to you for 5 minutes. You can go back and have a chat with her.
Yeah.
Do you want to keep it a secret or can you tell us what you might say?
It'll all be fine. It'll all be fine. Don't worry.
That's so cool. There's nothing else that needs to be said, is there?
There's nothing else that needs to be said. It'll all be fine.
In those, in those few words, what's really fascinating is that, oh God, I don't even want to talk into that really, because it just sums it up when you get older and you kind of look back and God, I worried about so many things that were completely insignificant.
Yeah.
Just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So where are we? Yeah, I'm not going to take any more of your time, but I am going to press you. I do need an answer, Sarah, for your story about a pop song.
Story about a song.
Have you got anything? Was your mind working in the background while we were talking, thinking of something?
Yeah, a little bit. And obviously this, music means a lot to me. And so there was a few different things I could have picked.
Go on.
But there's a song called Rock and Roll. And it's not a famous song. It's by somebody called Kevin Johnson. He was Australian. And it says, rock and roll, I gave you all the best years of my life. And it reminds me of growing up. It still is one of my dad's favourite songs. And I remember being really small and dancing on his feet in the living room at home. And lovely. It was just, I love that memory. And I don't think it happened once. It was something that I used to do, and me and my dad will still listen to that song together, and just I know every note. It's got a fantastic guitar solo at the end, and I love it. And it's all about it's about a man who wants to be a rock star, and he says, "I gave you all the best years of my life," and he never makes it. And Kevin Johnson didn't. He didn't make it as a huge star. He did okay. And I don't know if anybody else, has these memories of that song. But I like the fact that the song means so much to me. I'd have quite liked to have been a rock star, but I really enjoy what I do instead. And it's, I'm glad I didn't give rock and roll all the best years of my life, because, looking at it now, the song means something different to me. It's like, you could give rock and roll all the best years of your life and never get anywhere, or you can just enjoy it for what it is. Yeah. Enjoy playing it in your bedroom, enjoy watching it, listening to it, and be at peace with what you actually do instead. but the memory of like dancing on my dad's feet is just fantastic. And I hope my children have such happy memories of being at home with me when they're older.
Absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And you know what's really interesting is that I felt like what's quite fascinating about that is that Kevin Johnson didn't like make it, and yet who's to say, I mean, that what you've just shared with us is not more valuable, because I think like if one person watches any one of these conversations and says, God, I feel like that, you know what, I'm not the only one that feels like that. So maybe, and you know, and someone gets one spark, that's just amazing.
Well,
really.
that's what I always feel about work as well. Like, because I work with students, and you know, even if 90% of them will probably just come and go and not think twice about anything I've ever said. But every once in a while, you get a student. Like last year, a student graduated with us, and his mum came up and after the graduation and gave me a hug and said, "My son wouldn't have made it through university without you." And she had tears in her eyes, and I was like, that's what it's all about. It's about like this, like one or two every year that you make a really big difference to, and hopefully they'll never forget me. And that's all the fame I need, really, is like knowing that I'm making a difference to someone. Yeah,
right there, that's it. You know what, Sarah, you've been brilliant to talk to, and it's been such a joy. Thank you so much. I'm gonna try and find a link to that song.
Yeah, you should do it. It's an amazing song.
I'll hopefully be able to find it and link it to the video when I publish it.
That would be nice. Yeah. Kevin Johnson would be pleased, I'm sure.
Johnson. Yeah, we'll keep the memory of Kevin Johnson going. Thank you so much, Sarah.
I hope I get a chance to ask you all these questions sometime over a pint.
That'd be terrifying. All the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right. Cheers.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.